Today I interview Sorana Mitchell. She is a mother, singer-songwriter, writer, poet, and author of the memoir, Still Smiling. In her memoir and in today's interview, Sorana talks about several issues, including the sudden loss of her father when she was only a child, a difficult relationship with her mother, surviving sexual abuse, living with bipolar disorder, and finding positivity and joy despite it all. Sorana, it's so nice to have you here. We have
Thank
a
you,
lot to
Beth.
talk about. So I want to start with where you grew up and where you are now. I know you had some time in the US as well, but you're in Grenada and you were born there and grew up there. So tell me a little bit about that. What is it like living there?
Well, let's see. Grenada is in the Southern Caribbean. We are blessed with the tropics, lots of wonderful tropical fruits, the hot, humid air, the sea, the waterfalls. We have our own brand of, well, several brands of chocolates on the island. Grenada is, for me, it's not just home, but it's comfortable. And it's a happy it has mixed I have mixed memories, mixed feelings about Grenada, I'll be honest, but I love it. It's my home. I went to Catholic schools, which were public, by the way, were not paid for. I went to our national, well, I call it national, it's the TA Marisha Community College, where I focused on sociology and history, both British, well, European and Caribbean history. I ventured into journalism. It's a love I had from since I was a child. And thereafter, I worked as in PR at the Grenada Food and Nutrition Council. I also love to cook. Not so much anymore because it's showing too much.
When you were growing up there, what was your family life like? What was your family size? What kind of stuff did your parents do? What was that like?
Okay, so I am the last of, I don't want to give you the wrong count, 11 or 12 or 13 of us, somewhere around there. My dad had three children before he got together with my mom, with whom he had eight. So he's 11 and us of us in all. Well, 11 of us that survived because some died along the way. My parents were farmers, were small farmers, both my mom and my dad, but my dad mainly, he grew nutmegs, is known as the Isle of Spice, pure Grenada spice of the Caribbean. So we have lots of spices here. We have cinnamon, we have bay leaf, we have clove, just name it, we have it, the spices. And so my dad did mainly, he did nutmeg, he did the spices, he did short crops, he did root crops like the sweet potatoes and the yams, and he did like cabbages, tomatoes. So my family was very entrenched in agriculture. They were small farmers. As being the last, we had a very small house that expanded over the years in not in any planned fashion, I always say, because our house is very interesting. It starts one way, then they extended and they added a piece here, then they added another piece here. So it was not a planned building. Whenever they saw a little money and they were able to put on a piece, they were able to do that. My sisters and brothers before me were very involved in agriculture, as you know, even in the US growing up in the past, and I still think to now, where if you're on a farm, growing up on a farm, everyone participates, you know? So unlike my sisters, I did not have to go to the garden, as we called it, in the mountains, but they would go sometimes starting from Wednesday to the garden to get nutmeg, to get provisions, the cabbage, the carrots, the tomatoes, name it. Whatever they had to carry on their heads, they had to carry through rivers, some of them rushing rivers. They have to, sometimes they fall into the river. They have to get up, put the load back on their heads, and keep moving to get down. Then my sisters would go to St. George's, which is the capital city and they would sell the produce. So sometimes they wouldn't see school Wednesday to Friday. Sometimes they go to school only Monday and Tuesday. So I often say that I had it good where that is concerned. It was easier by the time I came around in 1978. My dad was fun. I mean, he loved music, he loved to dance, and I think I take that from him. On Sundays, especially, I would dance calypso with him. He would put me on his toes, as many dads do. I would stand on his feet and we would dance around and entertain his friends because he would call, Sarah, come, let's dance. And I was always ready to entertain. So I'm gone there dancing with my dad. And every time I hear that Luther Vandross song, I always tear up because I always remember dancing with my dad like that. Anytime I hear that song, I'm like, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear this song because it brings back that memory. And he was fun. He was a really good dad to all of us. I think my mom used to get angry because she said he spoiled me because I would get away with anything with him. I remember one time I stole money to buy a book. I was obsessed with books since I was a kid. And I remember that was the only time I saw my father look at me disappointed. He was so disappointed in me because my mom gave me $5 and I felt that was not enough. So Miss Book Craze went and steal her mother's $20 to buy books. And I got a book licking. Okay? But he didn't beat me. He just looked at me disappointed. And I never forget that look. And you grow up knowing that stealing is wrong. It's not something good to do. And you're reprimanded and everything like that. But I've been in situations where I was in great need, right? And there were times I could have stolen, you know, but I just could not get myself to go over that thing because like my father is always there giving me that look of disappointment. And I'm like, I'm disappointed him when I was yay high. I won't disappoint him again. My mom, she was a disciplinarian. She beat a lot. I know one sister who got licks with the whip. I remember one time she made my brother we had a tamarind tree, and my brother had to go get the tamarind for his licking, his beating. And that always stayed with me because I was younger and I was like, I have to go and get the implement that will hurt me so much for you to beat me with. I don't think so. So I think for the most part, I was a good girl, if I may say so. Yeah, yeah. I was a pretty good girl, especially after my father died. I did not want to cause problems for my mom because my mom died last year. That's 2022. And I don't think she ever got over the passing of my dad. I mean, he was her knight in shining armor. They had this love story. I recall like 20 some years ago, my dad would have died, maybe 15 years had passed, and there was a blanket, a yellow blanket. I'd never forget it. And he bought it for her the very first Christmas. And she said that they didn't have anything and she didn't know where he got the money from, but that is what he gave her for her Christmas. And I remember that yellow blanket, and I used to go and fold myself up in it because I thought that was the cutest thing in the world. For a man to do that for the woman he loves. Because if you don't have any money, some people would say, oh, I don't have any money. But he gave her something and she cherished it to the point where I heard it was in tatters. Okay. I'm going ahead of myself if I go there, but when it comes to finding a partner, I look at them, I listen to them, I see how they behave, and I compare them to my father. It's a different time They would have different occupations, professions, but there are intrinsic behaviors and so on that are there. And you look at things in people and you're like, I'm not looking for my father, of course, but had left a strong, strong, strong mark in my life. And my mother, who went through a heavy depression, I don't think she realized that is what it was, but she went through a heavy, heavy, heavy depression after he passed. And she struggled. She struggled. She struggled financially. She struggled emotionally. And it took a toll on how she parented us. As someone who would have evolved and understand things differently, I understand why my mother did a lot of things. Although in the process it hurt me, I understand why. She was operating from a level of hurt and pain and unresolved, issues. So I understand. It doesn't excuse certain behaviors, but I understand, and I have been able to forgive and release it because she was just a person who didn't understand her own self and what she was going through and how it was hurting her and how the depression was hurting her. So her treatment, her behavior, and everything, they were so intertwined. That's what I see a lot.
You said she was kind of a real strict and a disciplinarian and pretty tough with you kids and on you. And it sounds like the relationship with your father, though, was nice. Do you feel like it was really his death that kind of made her more difficult for you, towards you? Or was she always kind of that way?
Always, always that way. And I think it became worse because, like many, many people, from her time, she became financially dependent on her children, her grown children mainly. And she would always cry. My mom would always cry, oh, she missed my dad. She would, because his name was Mitchie. She would, oh, I miss Mitchie. Oh, I want Mitchie to come back. And she was like, always like that. Whenever a situation came up that was hard to deal with, But listening to my other siblings, she was always tough to deal with, okay? She was tough, 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 tough to deal with. And I think many a times I go in my mind and I think my mother was not prepared for a child like me. I was different from my other siblings. Let's put it that way. And I questioned things. I had a mind of my own. I just did whatever I wanted to do. I said whatever, especially when I was much younger. As I grew older, especially after my dad passed, I got quieter. But when I was younger and he was alive, man, I was just doing every and anything. And that she couldn't understand those things. I love to read. I love to read and disappear. And then I would watch a lot of movies and dream up of doing my own movies and stuff like that. And she didn't like the idea of me just sitting and reading a book. Go out there and do something. But I'm like, what do you want me to do? Because how I was brought up is like, we were not allowed to, and certain people would allow it, but my mom didn't. I didn't visit many people's houses and so on. So I played in the yard. Or if I was in the yard, she would say, get inside. So if I go inside, what I have to do is read or watch TV. But if I'm reading or watching TV, she has a problem with it. So that I couldn't find a balance. I did not know what to do that would please her. And that repeated itself over and over and over in my life with my mom. I couldn't find a balance. I could not find some way to please her. And then as I understood things easier, I was like, that's not my job to please her. It's a hard realization to come to. As children, as women, we naturally want to please. And when it comes to our parents, our mothers especially, we want them to love us and accept us. But sometimes they just don't, or they don't understand us. And so you want to be yourself, but at the same time, you want to be accepted and loved and all of those things by the person who brought you into this world. Just
Absolutely.
accept you as who
Yes.
you are. Because I wanted to be like my other siblings. So maybe because she liked them. So if I was like this one, maybe she would like me. But then I still couldn't get it, you know? So I was like, what the hell do I do for this woman to like me? And as I read more and I understood human nature, psychology, understanding myself, I realized it's not my job. It's not my job to please her. I can't do that. I can only be me. I can be respectful. I can be whatever, but I cannot please you. I cannot.
What age do you think it was when you came to that realization? Like, how many years do you think you tried to bend yourself in different ways to please her?
I came to that realization in my late 30s. I'll be 45 this year.
Okay.
It's pretty recent. And it's because we constantly trying to find ways and means for these people to love us. And it's like they don't understand. I've released it. I was able to forgive and release. Because if you don't do those things, you carry too much heaviness in you and you're susceptible to all sorts of things. So to reduce any sort of susceptibility to illnesses and so on, one of the things you learn to do is release, forgive, and keep moving. After my father died, many of my siblings disappeared from Grenada. They didn't want anything to do with Grenada because my father was the glue that held us together. And the tragic way in which he passed, or in the way we learned to accept the way he was passed because he was poisoned. That's what we were told. Because he just started to bleed and the doctors couldn't understand what was, so like something was cutting his insides. And later on, not too long ago, a family member who had access to information said to me, you know, your father was poisoned. That's what he said to me. So we were aware that that is what happened. And because of that, many of my siblings wanted nothing to do with Grenada. They just wanted to get as far away from this place as possible.
And how old were
And
you? How old were you at that
I was
time?
9. I was 9 years old.
So
And
you
I was
weren't
thinking,
going anywhere. You were there. You're gonna
uh-uh,
be there. Yep.
And I was a sheltered 9, okay? It's not like maybe 9-year-olds today, many of the 9-year-olds today would be out and about and know this, know that. I mean, that would have been 1987 in the Caribbean, on the small island. So I was pretty sheltered and I experienced my mother's depression. I felt it. When I was going through my own depression, it felt something about it felt similar. Like I experienced this before. Because if you're in close proximity to someone, and if you're depending on someone, your behaviors could affect that other person. So in the process, her behaviors or depression affected me. But I have a nature, my friends always say I'm bubbly and this and the other. But somehow the bubbliness would come out outside, but when I'm inside the house or surrounded by the depression, you feel it more. And my mother kind of came out of the depression in a way in the mid to late 90s. I think so. I would have graduated from high school, would have gone through all of that. And I think the birth of my niece, that kind of woke up something in her. I knew that helped to bring some life into her. So that helped her.
Let's go back to your dad's death. Sounds like he was a really wonderful father. And then you find out at some point that he was poisoned. Tell me this story. What happened here? What do you know about it? I mean,
Okay, so that
this is a crazy story.
so this is how it is. I remember it was November. I just turned 9. September is my birthday. So November, I was on the veranda playing with a ball. My mom was grating coconut to make coconut oil. And word came from her parents, her mother, that my father was vomiting. He was sick, vomiting blood. So that's serious. So they got a friend, a family friend. We didn't have ambulance and all of that thing available to us. So a family friend with a car took him to the hospital. But before he went to the hospital, they brought him to our house to get a change of shirt. And that was the last time I saw him. And he lifted his hand, and I was like, Daddy, being all spoiled as I am. And he lifted his hand in this weak way that I was able to, I always remember that look on his face. There was this fearful look on his face. I always remembered it, and I couldn't understand what it meant. I never saw it there before. I always saw joy and fun, that sort of thing. And he died the day after. I went to school, and I was getting ready to go home to leave the school. And the driver of a relative of mine who was a politician, he said he spoke to some of the teachers who were there, and he came and he said, in our Grenadian vernacular, he's "I come for you." So I went with him, and there in my cousin's vehicle, my mom was bawling. She was screaming, "Oh God, he dead, your father dead." Just like that. That's how it was broken to me. And I remember feeling very cold at 9 years old. I didn't understand where this coldness came from. So my mom was in the car. My father's goddaughter, who was a nurse, was in the car trying to console my mother. And I'm sitting there, and my mom is just bawling. And I'm like, in the back of my head, I was like, would she shut up? Because sometimes I am understanding myself now, because it's just too much noise. My father's dead and you're just making too much noise. Will that bring him back? I don't know. I don't understand. Where's my father? You're bawling, he's dead, yada yada yada. So then we go home, and then the whole house is just tears and bawling and bawling and bawling. So then he gets buried and everything. So a few months later, we were home, and a bus came down or the road where we live. It's called Granton Road. Buses don't normally come down that road, well, back then. And a lady whom I knew, I saw her. She came and she was like, "I have to speak to your mother right now." That's what she told my sisters. And she said, I keep having a dream, and I know what happened to your father. Go and get your mother now. So there were rumors swirling around the area or community or village of as to why or how he died. And finally, my mother came to hear what this woman had to say. So we walk into the living room, and the woman pulls all the curtains. She pulls out these candles. She lights them. And then she starts this guttural kind of whatever. And I'm like the youngest, and I'm like, what the hell is this woman doing? And then she starts saying all these different things and describing people and doing all the things. And my mother starts to bawl, oh gosh, she knew who killed my father. And then afterwards she said that your father was poisoned, and she sees clearly who did it, how they did it and everything. And that made us all very cold, right? And then she said, well, I'm sitting there, I don't know what's going on. Like, remember, I'm 9 years old, I'm experiencing this thing. And then she says, oh God, Sorana, something bad go happen to you. And I'm there like, what? How did I get involved in this? So like many times, fast forward years later, after being sexually abused, after learning that I live with bipolar disorder and everything I went through as a result, I'm like, was that what this woman was talking about? Is this that? Is this, I'm always wondering, Did she see something? I don't know because I don't live my life in that fashion. Although I understand and I respect that there are people with these gifts, these
Right.
abilities. Because of that, many of my siblings didn't want to have anything, as I said before, with our village. They wanted to be as far away as possible. So many of them, not knowing how they would make it, just left Grenada, went to Canada, went to America, anywhere they could make it but Grenada, try to make it. And that's how we learned about my father, the
What
whole.
about, would there have ever been an investigation? Because you did mention that recently a family member actually did tell you, I think, did they have access to medical records or something like that? But they told you that he was in fact poisoned. So is
Mhm,
that right?
mhm. I have, they just like my siblings are like, leave it alone. Karma is going to take care of the people who participated. And he wouldn't have wanted anything. But I'm like, knowing the journalist in me, I'm like, I was at a point, I was like, I'm gonna get his body exhumed. I remember going through that, and I was like, I think not. I think when I was putting myself back together after learning I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, I was like, these are the things I want to do to bring some closure in my life. I want my father's body exhumed. I want this to be done, testing to be done, and yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, my sisters would never sign on for that. My brothers wouldn't. He has passed on. He's in a better place. He was a good person. It's not like he was a wicked person. We're not worried about that. And so that's how we dealt with it because we don't have the evidence per se. You understand?
Right.
We have this woman who came to us. We have people later on who would have been in circumstances or in places where they heard things and came and told my mom what was said,
Mhm.
by certain people. And so because of that, we grew up, don't take anything from anyone, don't lend anybody anything. And I couldn't lend anybody my books. I couldn't borrow books from people. And afterwards, I was like, I had enough of this. I'm going to lend whomever I want, whenever, however. When I get home and I get a two slap, too bad. I don't care. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because it's tough to live with paranoia like that. That's just
exactly.
tough way to live.
Yes. And I lived it because my mom, the woman gave my mom this thing to pin on me to protect me. And then I took it off and I was like, this is nonsense. And I became very, very holy. I was raised Catholic, so I would be saying the rosary morning, noon, and night. Mary and I were very good friends, okay? The saints knew me as well, okay?
Yeah. I get that though. That's an intense experience. I mean, that's an intense
Yes,
thing. It's one thing to
yes.
lose your father, but to have it be in these circumstances that are so suspicious and then everybody to be very scared, legitimately scared about it. I mean, that is a tough way to have to live.
Mhm, mhm.
So let me ask you, you mentioned that you did suffer sexual abuse at some point in your life. Tell me about how that happened.
Oh, okay, so after my father died, I was also close to a sister of mine who was one of his children with a previous woman. And she grew up in the house with us, with my mom and so on. But she was a really lovely woman. And I still have a place in my heart for her because she was more of a mom to me than my own mother. She read to me, that sort of thing. So she was a twin, and both of them were living in Montreal, Canada. And they used to give me trips to Montreal, especially after I passed the exam to go into secondary school. So there I was in Canada the very first time. As I write in the book, my first experience is eating Chinese food, fast food, being all exposed to all of these things. And on the second trip, I was home alone, and the boyfriend of one of the twins, not the one I was very close to, he was sent to the house to check on me. And in the process, he molested me. And I never said anything. But then when I returned home, I think it was on the third trip, He then lied on me and said that at the time was not in a relationship with anybody. I was a teenager, and it was not encouraged for us in my mother's house to have a boyfriend while you go into school. After school, you deal with that. That's how we were brought up. But he said that I told him I had a boyfriend with whom I was sexually active. So they called Grenada and told my mom, look, Sorana is sexually active. And my mother was like, no, that's not true. And then I told the truth that he was molesting me. My mother got very angry with me. And she blamed me. She was like, why did you allow this to happen? And that hurt a lot. And I blamed myself a lot over the years. Why did you allow it to happen? And that put a lot of pressure on me. And then the family broke up. That relationship with the family broke up, and I blamed myself for it as well. I didn't get to see that sister again ever. Well, yeah, I did see her again, but it was under strained relations.
Did some people in your family not believe you?
Yeah, the sisters in Montreal did not believe me, but the rest of my family believed me. That affected my relationship with growing up, growing into a young woman, to be able to have a relationship with a boyfriend, loving myself, accepting myself. I started to binge eat. I did not want to look cute. And then I wanted to look cute. Oh gosh, this is so crazy. This is my definition of crazy. You wanted to look cute and attractive to guys, but at the same time, you did not want to look cute because you did not want to look attractive to them. Okay, that's my definition of crazy. And I had a resurgence of that after the whole mental illness diagnosis and how my then husband treated me. I did not want to be attractive to men anymore. So I was like, I'm going to put on weight, right? I was able to track it in my brain, recently. And I was like, oh my gosh, I made a decision to put on weight so that I would not be attractive. And here I am fighting to look attractive again. So I am repeating what I did in my teen years because of certain things that happened. And I was like, I have to put an end to this. I have to go into me and stop trying to fix the outside because of what is going on in the inside. Fix the inside and then the outside will be better, So I recently came to that conclusion, come to that realization that I was repeating my teen years again with the binge eating. And I was like, oh God, not again.
But you know what? I'm sure a lot of people who've been through those sorts of traumatic situations can understand that. I mean, you characterize it as crazy, but when you're dealing, I think, with something that's so traumatic, I think you're doing your best to try to make sense of it all. And especially if you don't feel a ton of support from those around you, you just have to do your best. And so although it could seem crazy, it also makes sense because you've been victimized by a man. And so it's understandable that they're scary to you and you want to repel them to some degree. But then also there's a part of you that wants to live as if that never happened and get a boyfriend and all that. So I think that in its own way, it does make sense. And so the aftermath of trying to navigate that, what kind of effect do you think that had on you for so many years that other people going through that might also relate to? Because it's a really awful thing to happen to you.
How it affected it affected sexual abuse stays with the victim forever. In lessening degree, because especially if you get help and if you continue to help yourself along the way, you have to continue helping yourself along the way. It is something that I have learned being diagnosed with bipolar disorder. The doctors can do so much, you have to do the rest. That's what I say. And so being sexually abused affected who I was totally. My self-esteem, my self-worth, confidence. I think I learned this word in America, chutzpah, got me through a lot, just getting up and do things. But I wasn't grounded. There wasn't that confidence. There was not that self-esteem. There wasn't, I just did things because I wanted to do them. And the fear would always be there. I felt like it wasn't real. It wasn't real.
Well, I noticed in your memoir, you had mentioned that before the abuse began, and it sounds like it was over a period of time, it was not just one time,
Mhm.
that you had gotten really into sports, you were really active.
Yes.
And then when you came back after, all of that stopped. And so talk about that a little bit.
Oh my gosh, it affected my whole life. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like had I not been sexually abused. Sometimes I wonder, could I have been like Serena Williams? Or because I love tennis, okay? And this tennis coach told me, he said to me, "You have a powerful backhand. You're really good out there." And every morning, without no one encouraging me, I got a tennis racket from my sisters. I brought it down from Montreal. But before then, the man used to allow us to use tennis rackets in Grenada that they had. And I would go on the court on Saturday mornings. And it was an elderly man because he was looking for a new crop of tennis players in Grenada. It wasn't as big as cricket, which is a great game that they play in the Caribbean that comes from Britain, but a football or anything to us. I don't know. I can't remember how I got into it. Don't ask me how I got into it. I can't recall. All I know, I started playing tennis and I loved it. And I would be playing. Then I played netball. So I was out there doing all these things, having fun. And then it closed me up. It closed me up. I didn't want to do anything anymore. All I wanted to do was just disappear. I would eat to disappear. But when you eat, you don't disappear, you show more. Mm? And I just disappeared. My love for the things I loved died. I sing now, and I think without the sexual abuse, I would have been singing longer. And sometimes I look at how this thing put a cap on my life, It put a cap on my life. It is up to you as a person who has been abused to uncap your life, to turn it off or to take it off. Someday forcefully will hurt a lot, so you take your time and get it off. When you look at the layers and layers and layers of ways and how this affects you, you don't want to do anything. You're afraid of your own self. I liked guys and I was afraid to be around them. And that used to make me so sad. I remember crying for a friend of mine, as I wrote in the books. I wanted a boyfriend so badly because there were so many guys that I liked that were so cute, but I was afraid. And what happens? How do I deal with them? You question yourself. You don't know how to act with them, because I learned that when you're sexually abused, you can go from either spectrum. Either you become very promiscuous or you become very closed. And I became very closed. And so sexual abuse messes with you thoroughly. It messes with the mind, it messes with the body, it messes with the spirit, it messes with your whole being. And if you want to kill a child, abuse them, whether it be verbally, emotionally, sexually, especially sexually. All of them are bad, but especially sexual. And then sometimes the sexual abuse isn't done in such a way that it covers every other abuse. So if you want to kill a child, abuse them, sexually abuse them. In my case, sexual abuse literally almost killed me. Okay? It almost killed me.
So you have written this book that's called Still Smiling, and you've pushed forward. You've kept going. Like you said, you have chutzpah. You just kept moving forward. Now, you did have this other sort of challenge that you ran into where you were diagnosed as bipolar. You said that came years later. Do you want to talk about that a little?
Sure. The depression was always there, but but the mania was on a little, what should I say? Not high, but it was able to help to get me through. And so in 2002, late 2001 into 2002, my mind took up a speed of its own that it was getting out of Grenada because I felt I was going to die if I stayed in Grenada. I literally felt that way. And I just felt I had to get out because I had issues with my mom. I didn't know what I wanted to do in my life anymore. So all these things were happening, and I just felt like I was going to lose my mind. And so I hopped a plane, headed to the US, and decided I'm not coming back. Now, I always go back in my mind, I was like, Sorana, you were really not well. Because 2002, you go to the US, that's a year after 9/11, if I'm correct. Things had really changed in the US. In a thinking person's mind, you don't do something like that. But I didn't care because I felt I was going to die had I stayed in Grenada. That's how I felt. I literally felt like I was going to die. So there I was. I ended up in the US. I met my daughter's father, whom I had known in Grenada. He's Grenadian. And I just felt I could wing it. I just felt I didn't care. And although we had it rough, I think had it been someone with worse temperament, my experience would have been terrible, terribly worse. And after my daughter was born in 2004, I felt like something was happening. I was like, is this postpartum depression? I didn't know. But we needed finance, we needed money so badly. At 6 months old, I left my daughter in care and went to as a housekeeper in the US. And while there, I started deteriorating. Now I realized something was wrong, but I couldn't pinpoint it. So I was like, what is wrong with me? I have a husband, I have a child, I have a job. What else do I need? Why do I feel this way? I don't know if anybody has experienced that. You have all these things, but you're still, what is wrong? Why are you depressed? Why are you feeling so low? What is wrong? And then it started to affect everything. It affected everything. And then finally, it had a breakdown. And they said it was bipolar. I mean, I was tested for everything in the world. And I didn't want to accept it. There I was living in the US, undocumented, and I didn't want to accept this whole bipolar thing. I'm like, this thing is a joke. It's this. I'm trying to find, I said, maybe it was a sexual abuse. Maybe it is this. Maybe it's that. I'm not accepting a mental illness diagnosis. So I didn't take the medication. I deteriorated again. I didn't take the medication. I deteriorated again until I accepted and took ownership of myself, And then it took a while for me to regroup and put myself back together because I had a young daughter. So I had to think about her. I had to think about myself. And I had to heal everything. It was just so much, so much, so much. And I had no support, zero support. And sometimes I wonder, how the hell did I make it? Okay. I'm serious. And I laugh sometimes. I laugh at inappropriate times, but yeah, sometimes I wonder how the hell did I make it? Because I was almost homeless. I was living off people's couches, living in people's homes, because I had nowhere to live with my daughter. And then I made the decision that I'm returning to Grenada. But while there, I got the urge to sing. And it just kept coming. Like Beth, it just kept coming. No matter how I fought it, I'll be cleaning and I'll be, and then I bust out into song. So I was not afraid to investigate it. I found some wonderful people who helped me. There are angels out there, and they continued to help me and help me and help me. And I came to the to realization that hey, I'm not documented. I'm in this place illegally. The climate in this country has changed totally. I do not belong here. I am not finding someone just to get a green card because I'm not exposing my daughter to craziness. She has been through enough. So I went back home. My mother was alive. She was like, come back. So I returned to Grenada and my mother refuses me into her home. So there I arrive in Grenada. I have nowhere to live. My mom just said, you're not welcome. So she know what was at that time in her late 70s was deteriorating with senility, Alzheimer's or whatever, something. And she was like, you're not coming to my home. So I had to stay at my sibling's house for a few weeks, get a job, get a place for my daughter and myself. And that was my return to Grenada. And it has been an uphill climb since then. I joke sometimes and I say I've been back here 5 years and it feels like 50. Mm-hmm. Like seriously, it feels like 50. But for what it's worth, I had a relapse since I returned because I started distancing myself. I was dealing with a lot and I just didn't want to deal with this mental illness again. So I started not taking the medication consistently. And with dealing with a lot of issues, plus you have a mental illness, you're susceptible to a breakdown, of which I did experience. But as usual, I put myself back together and I'm working on myself. And it's a work in progress. I have come a long way. And many people who are listening to this or who would listen to this, who, if you see yourself in that, you would understand that you would have come a long way from where you were. You have to make the decision to want to move forward for a better life. Because if you don't make that decision, you are going to stay in that hell for the rest of your life. And you don't put yourself in that hell, especially if you're being sexually abused. You were victimized. And if you continue to allow that person to control your life, you are continuing to victimize yourself. And I had to come to that realization. I was like, no, you don't control me anymore. I control this narrative. I'm in charge. I have to do this. I have to take care of me. And that's what I do on a daily basis. Positive affirmations, everything positive that I can do. Think positive, be kind and loving, forgive, release, and put a smile on my face and keep moving.
Yeah, I think it's like what you're saying. Every day you're moving forward, you're doing your best. It's never a finished product for anybody. Nope. And especially after sexual abuse and a lot of the difficulties that you face. So it's amazing the way that you're pushing forward and what you've done for you and for your daughter. And the other thing I was going to bring up is the singing. Before we close out here, the singing, it seems like that's been something really nice for you.
Yes.
And it sounds like you're saying it just kind of came out of you at some point where it was going to happen.
It came from nowhere. I say that singing has chosen me. at this point in my life. But of course, if you have a gift, you have to hone it, you have to work on it, you have to craft it. And that's what I do. So I got voice lessons. I was able to meet a few wonderful people in Grenada who I meet up with. And most Saturdays we rehearse and we would record and put on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and stuff like that. And music is therapy. You have to find the things that make you happy, along with medication. A medication alone can't do it. A doctor alone wouldn't do it. You have to couple that with the environment, the people you choose to have around you, the things, your diet, the things that you put into yourself, not just the food, but the thoughts, the people you surround yourself with. Music has helped me to heal. And writing and books. Those are the things. I write songs, I sing. I've stopped dancing. I have to start back dancing. My daughter dances for me because she dances for everybody. She dances and dances and dances. But I am grateful that singing has chosen me. I feel that it is a big job, that it has chosen me, but I'm not afraid of a challenge. I keep working on myself, honing on my craft. There's so much to learn. There's just so many wonderful songs to sing. And my thing right now is to record my original songs and get them out there. That's what I want to do. But everything comes at a cost,
Yep.
And so I'm taking it one step at a time.
Well, thank you so much. We covered a lot of things. And again, you have this memoir you've written that covers a lot of this as well, called Still Smiling.
Smiling is on Amazon. It's on Amazon.
And it is available on Amazon?
In Kindle and paperback version. Yes.
Awesome. And is there anything else before we close out that you can think that you'd like to get out there?
Forgive yourself. Do it as many times as you have to feel comfortable. And whenever you fall, don't bring back the past to remind you of all the bad things you've done. It's easy to go there because once you start with one negative thought, another one comes, another one. Forgive yourself. Love yourself. Find the things that you love and do them. Especially not things that would hurt you. I mean, would be detrimental to your health. Like some people might like illicit drugs, but it's not good for you. Choose the things that make you healthy and whole and wonderful. Because this is your life. This is nobody else's life. Especially for those of us who have been sexually abused, for example. You've been victimized. Do not let that perpetrator continue to control your life. You have to take that cap off and live your life to the full. It's one life you have. Live it to the full. Live it with love. Live it with joy. Live it with a smile. Because I'm still smiling.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much.